Welcome, listeners, to www.IronRadio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. This is Iron Radio, another episode. I'm Phil Stevens. I'm a strength coach, Highland Games athlete, power lifter, and maker of many fine things.
Hey, this is Dr. Mike Nelson, creator of the Flex Diet Cert, Physiologic Flexibility Certification, and still back home.
This is Coach Durrell, Strength Guild in KC. Now it's just growing the gym for a little while here.
Right on. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm a nutritionist, food industry consultant, former competitive bodybuilder.
Nice. Mike, I will say before we get going here on the topics, have you watched the I have a new respect for your guys' quarterback up there in Minnesota. Have you watched that quarterbacks documentary?
No.
It's really good. And,
what is it on? I gotta watch it now.
It's on Netflix. They did an 8.
Oh.
So they followed Kirk Cousins, Patrick Mahomes, and Marcus Mariota through the whole season.
Oh, interesting.
And it's just, holy crap. He got killed. Your guys' quarterback got killed all year. They're just showing he was barely healthy enough to play by the next weekend. And it just shows, it does a really good job of showing what these fuckers go through. And just all the hours of rehab, and like our goal is hopefully be 80% by next Sunday.
Oh, yeah. He does a ton of rehab. I know through a friend, I know who does some of the stuff, with him. Not directly, but yeah. And even just the amount of reps it has to take to step forward into a 300+ pound human who is going to crush you like a human sandwich, and still make the throw with that accuracy is just it's one thing to do it in the back if you're not being touched, and that's still at an extremely high level skill. But to do that in the face of knowing you're just going to get sandwiched into the ground, yeah,
it was a good documentary. We ended up
I gotta watch that. I'm excited.
We finished it last night. Yeah, it's good.
Oh, so, cool. All right.
They did a real good job following him. But
I've heard he's like a super nice dude on top of everything.
Yeah, he seemed that way.
Yeah,
He's a really nice guy, and just working his ass off. Went into all the cognitive work and just tons of stuff they did.
Yeah,
but
I don't think he gets enough credit for even just if you look at just the pure performance base.
Yeah,
with out really having a lot of protection all year.
yeah. He was getting murdered. So, all right,
cool. All right, well, let's see. Let's talk a little bit about drugs.
Okay.
There's something that keeps coming up, and I thought I'm going to talk about this and try not to get in the weeds, really. A paper is about to come out August 2023, so it's not even here yet, but you can get it ahead of time. It's about metformin, and I don't know how many listeners have listened to metformin, and honestly, I've only heard off and on over the years bodybuilders interested in this kind of stuff, right? It's a type 2 diabetes drug. There's over 200 million patients who are on it for, blood sugar control and that kind of thing. It's been around for, over half a century. But they're starting to repurpose it. I've been hearing in the news, like Ray Kurzweil, he's one of the, I think, head engineer at Google. He's taking it for like longevity reasons and that kind of stuff. And this started to get my attention. Anyway, so this new piece is metformin update on mechanisms of action and repurposing potential. And I'm going somewhere with this because apparently it does a lot more than they first thought, like mostly acting through the liver, suppress, glucose output from your liver and that kind of stuff. But it stimulates different systems, brown adipose tissue, all kinds of cool stuff that could help with fat loss and even weight maintenance after you diet. Like we've talked over the years about this adaptive thermogenesis, how your metabolism will slow way down when you diet, and it just seems to be stuck there for a long time. Anyway, so here's what it says. Early evidence highlighted the liver as the major organ involved in metformin on reducing blood levels of glucose. However, increasing evidence toward other sites of action could be important, including the gastrointestinal tract, gut microbiota communities, tissue-resident immune cells, It says, based on the efficacy and safety records, in diabetics at least, attention has been given to repurposing metformin as adjunct therapy for cancer, age-related diseases, inflammatory diseases, and even COVID-19. Now, one of these mechanisms caught my eye, but first, here's the key points from the paper. I like these. This is from Nature Reviews Endocrinology. Key points. The liver and the gut are the main targets for metformin. Host gut microbiota interactions contribute to metformin's effects. Metformin has anti-inflammatory and immunomodulatory properties on both the innate and the adaptive immune systems. And then here it is. Metformin therapy in patients with type 2 diabetes enhances the release of GDF-15, which might facilitate weight loss. So there's another paper, and I got this separately, but I'm like, okay, these things are all kind of creating a story. This is also from Nature, just came out June 23. GDF-15, again, one of the mechanisms by which metformin works, because I've heard metformin described as like a brute force assault on your metabolic pathways. It just does all these different things. But GDF-15 promotes weight loss by enhancing energy expenditure in muscle. So this is by Wang and colleagues, lots of colleagues. In fact, it's one of these papers where it's important enough that people pile on. And you know what I'm talking about, Mike? Like there's like,
oh yeah, everyone in the brother wants in on that.
Right, I want a piece of that. So here's the deal. Caloric restriction promotes weight loss, and it starts off just saying, oh, this is a good thing, right? Better lower your blood pressure, improve your blood glucose handling, all that. Despite its effectiveness, in most individuals, weight loss is usually not maintained, shocker, partly because of physiologic adaptations that suppress energy expenditure, a process known as adaptive thermogenesis. It says, recombinant growth differentiating factor 15, GDF-15, reduces obesity and improves glycemic control through suppression of food intake, but this is more important, I think. Here we find that in addition to suppressing appetite, GDF-15 counteracts compensatory reductions in energy expenditure that would lead to greater weight loss over time. The effect of GDF-15 to maintain energy output during calorie restriction requires a beta-adrenergic dependent signaling axis, and of course a lot of lifters, they'll take beta agonists like clenbuterol, right, somaterol. There's a whole bunch of these selective beta-2 agonists. Anyway, it works partly through that to increase basically fat burning, fatty acid oxidation, and calcium fetal cycling in skeletal muscle. Now, this is of mice. Granted, this is of mice. But what's interesting to me is these are really high-level researchers, and they're starting to hone in on what I used to call the restriction contradiction, right? The harder you restrict in diet, the slower your metabolic rate's going to become, and then you're just going to regain weight like crazy and all that kind of thing. So to me, this is just really interesting stuff that the GDF-15, quote, blocks adaptive thermogenesis. I mean, that's crazy. This is the kind of thing where maybe through taking metformin, so since it increases this is, again, not the only mechanism by which metformin would work, for weight loss. But if they can start selling this, it's a, cytokine protein hormone. If they can start selling this and get it to the point that it's an actual drug, then dieting could potentially work forever, if that makes any sense. Like I used to say, you can't just diet. People think they can pay their dues and go back to their old ways. But, at that point, your metabolism's slow, you put on weight. I mean, think about bodybuilders with a refeed. Like this could be an ideal thing, whether it's through metformin use, which is, by the way, also a very cheap med. But metformin, or if they start selling this itself, your metabolism wouldn't be slowed to a crawl. And when you started refeeding, you wouldn't be as likely to just hack on the fat. So, yeah, and it seems to be working, at least in mice, through beta receptors in muscle tissue. So I have lamented over the years many times, how long before my body weight set point readjusts, and how long will my metabolism be slowed? And I saw some stuff earlier this year. They showed adaptive thermogenesis, this slowed metabolic rate, even 2 years later. Now, I think it depends on the person. And some of this, it makes me think about, because the effects are on muscle, what about our listeners that have more muscle mass? Would the effects be more dramatic? So I don't know. Interesting stuff, though, about this cheap drug that's getting repurposed for everything from dieting to longevity, and a lot of these industry moguls are now on it, metformin at least, because it looks like it might increase lifespan and all that other kind of stuff. So, yeah, kind of chewy, but to think you could diet and not slow your metabolism. I mean, that's the whole reason that we used to progressively pull carbs, out of a diet. Like you might start with 400 grams of carb a day, and then for a couple of weeks I'd eat 350 a day. Then for a couple of weeks I'd eat 300, and then 250. This kind of progressive approach, because I was always worried about just crushing my metabolism and losing all my muscle mass. And I've seen guys make terrible mistakes with bodybuilding diets. They're normally they eat 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day or something crazy. They drop to like 1,200, and they go from like 270-pound beasts to competing as middleweights, like 100 pounds less. And you're like, you did something wrong, Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do with, you just lose a bunch of muscle mass and you slow your metabolic rate and everything else. But yeah, maybe GDF-15 is the protein hormone that is the linchpin for all this. I don't know.
I mean, my general thoughts are that I have on my list at some point to do a super deep dive into metformin. I've looked at it a fair amount off and on, but I haven't gone back and pulled the original papers, that kind of thing. Even the exact mechanism of it from experts that I've seen is still debated.
Oh, man, all over the place.
Yeah, which seems kind of crazy. And I think, like you said, Lonnie, it's an older drug, and it appears to have these huge shotgun effects that, how many decades later we're still trying to figure out exactly what it's doing, which to me is oddly fascinating, but it's, generally relatively safe. It's been around, and like you said, bazillions of doses have been used. It's still chronically used by a lot of people. My concern, though, is more in people who are on the healthier side, taking it for potential longevity benefits. And there is some data, like you talked about there, showing that, and there's some other cool effects. However, there's been more data showing that it may actually inhibit the adaptations to exercise.
Yeah.
So one study from, I think it's Konopka, Konopka. This is from Aging and Cell, so pretty high-level journal. Metformin inhibits mitochondrial adaptations to aerobic exercise in older adults. Now, again, these were in older adults. These are not super, super healthy, young people. However, if you read the study in humans, potentially up to a 50%, rushing of adaptation to aerobic exercise after 12 weeks, which was pretty significant. Again, these are not elite level athletes, but they also talk in here about the influence of metformin on muscle skeletal protein synthesis and nutrient sensing,
right?
Where some of the acute effects, it seems to be negative, although maybe some of the chronic effects with insulin sensitivity is better. So they said in here, quote, in the conclusion area, they said, our findings show that metformin inhibits the increase in skeletal muscle mitochondrial respiration after 12 weeks of moderate to vigorous aerobic training, despite no difference between placebo and metformin on mitochondrial protein synthesis. Metformin also attenuates the increase in whole body insulin sensitivity after aerobic exercise. However, metformin did not inhibit or change other improvements such as telomere elongation, fasting insulin, and 24-hour mean glucose and body composition. So to me, it's just fascinating how it seems to be so bipolar and have just weird responses. And I've talked to a couple other people recently. I won't say their names because it's not public knowledge, but pretty high level in the health and fitness, usually more former competitive athletes of some form. And both of them, I was just asking them in private. I said, do you use metformin? What is your experience with it? And both of them were saying that they tried it. They used it for quite a while. These are generally very healthy people, do have a lot of muscle mass. And both of them said they stopped taking it because they felt like exercise was more difficult and it was, messing up the adaptations they're trying to get from exercise.
Yeah. Did you hear much about the dose? Apparently there's a huge dose
effect. That's the main issue.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now these guys, the one guy said he actually even tried to go down to a very low dose, and he said he still saw an effect, so he just dropped it. The other guy, I didn't get exactly what dosage he was using. So the pro metformin people, which I agree with you, would argue that, well, it's very dose dependent, that if you're on a very high dose, you're going to see those effects. If you're on a small dose, you're not. I can't find any literature to point to that. It just seems like even dosage, we just don't know that much about. And I agree that could very well be a huge confounding factor, no question.
Yeah, when you think about these media guys that are into this, like Kurzweil and some of these longevity guys, they're not bodybuilders. You know what I mean? I don't even know how much they exercise. For me, it's my big interest heading forward is looking at, like you said, like mTOR, skeletal muscle adaptations, that kind of stuff. It sounds like it's for dieting or through this GDF-15 mechanism, maybe maintaining metabolic rate instead of slowing it down. I mean, I was under no delusions that I was going to make any type of progress or gains when I was dieting hard. It's a weird aspect of bodybuilding, isn't it? That instead of peaking for something performance-wise or muscle-wise, you've built your muscle mass. Now you're going to cross your fingers and diet real hard and try to not lose too much. You're going to lose some while you diet, I think. And people who think they can gain muscle and lose fat at the same time, well, it depends on the other cocktail of drugs you're on, I guess.
And how experienced you are.
Yeah. But yeah, is it going to screw with my gains? I don't think I would want to take it all the time. Certainly not when I'm trying to put on some muscle mass, just in case it's screwing with that. You know, I need to look into that.
I was going to say the other part that would worry me is I was just looking up some stuff, and there was a study from last year about metformin-induced muscle atrophy.
Right.
So down-regulation of your myostatin gene and stuff like that. So actual muscle wasting going on. So
and a lot of these guys, they want to live a long time. They probably don't care. I mean, a lot of these same guys, honestly, they're also on testosterone therapy and stuff. They're on So, it's an interesting med. And to think that, like I said, my primary interest in what I just saw this last week was, they look like they're honing in, I mean, metformin or not, on this hormone that's kind of at least one of the linchpins of why you have this restriction contradiction, why you slow down your metabolic rate when you diet aggressively. Because if they can figure that out, that's going to be pretty amazing, right? Because then instead of going into starvation mode, your body's trying to protect itself by slowing its metabolism in the face of a low-calorie diet, you continue to dump out this thermogenic effect. And if they can tease that apart, that's going to be crazy, because dieting will work better. You know, you won't have that adaptation and stuff like that. So,
and that gets in the whole field of, peptides, which are definitely a gray area, and even some of the Russian stuff now that's supposedly on like bioregulating, compounds, and there's so much of that seems to be changing all the time. I can't keep it straight.
It's exciting for me when a journal of this here, Nature, is looking at, maybe this is why metabolism slows down, because then we could, who knows what's going to come of that, but it looks really interesting to me. It'd be fun to look on some bodybuilding websites and see what guys are saying about, did they lose muscle mass when they took metformin or whatever. I don't think, at least I don't know of anybody who's taking GDF-15 directly. You got to be careful, because that's a biomarker for cancer and some bad things, but it might just be because it's a stress cytokine and it's just high because it's like innocent bystander at the scene of the crime, and it's not causing cancer, but
dosing and stuff too. Like maybe you want it to spike concentration super high and then just let it go back to baseline for many hours. But, bodybuilders in general tend to be like, more is better. So now you've got these, chronic elevations in it all the time, which could have a potentially opposite response from what you're looking for.
Right. Yeah. You know what? It's because of anabolics. More is more effective. The more you take, the more jacked you become. It's why kids these days are taking a gram. They start with a base of a gram or two.
Oh my God.
And back in the 80s, people would take like a single, like a ampule of Sustanon or something. That's like a quarter of 1 gram, not 1,000 or 2,000. I'm like, you measure protein in grams, not testosterone. But I think that's part of that. More is better, because with a lot of things like calories or anabolics, more is better for what they're looking for, at least, I think, as far as, gains. And so, it's hard to deprogram that mentality.
Yeah. But as we've talked about before, it's not linear, and everybody assumes when they hear more is better that it's a linear response, and you can definitely hit that part of the curve where it's calories, exercise, wherever, where it'll definitely flatten out, and then it's going to start to go backwards on you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Caffeine, pick.
Yeah,
there's lots of things.
Pick your poison. Yeah.
Right.
As I drink my coffee.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's just some nerdy drug news that I saw. Like I said, now I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive on both muscle mass and what it does mechanistically, some of these drugs like metformin and what bodybuilders do, because you can learn a lot. I mean, people might say, oh, that's terrible, it's unethical, you can't study that stuff. Oh, come on. Bodybuilders have experimented on themselves, and powerlifters to some extent, of course, for years and years. And it'd be interesting to see, if you want to know what clinical outcomes are, go see what people are actually doing. It's not like you're forcing them to take it or anything. Anyway.
I mean, there's lots of articles about its use in bodybuilding. So,
I need to look it up. So. Yeah.
But, yeah.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio /Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. Second, please tell your friends who are longtime loyal listeners that they may see emails that share just the episode link and the show notes. This is a new thing, and we hope it will build community. Third, if you were a supporting member in the past, we may prompt you to resume through PayPal, but we will confirm each and every donor before reinstating that membership category. We'll never just restart your $4 auto payments without agreement from you. And of course, we will accept new members moving forward as well. Starting back slowly and honorably is the goal. And lastly, expect the sister show Nutrition Radio to expand into once weekly 45 to 60 minute episodes with guest co-hosts covering the same nerdy nutrition news that's been broadcast for a few months now in daily 10-minute clips. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
Other than that, we were going to talk about, just because this has been coming up a lot lately, I wanted to get your guys' take on training adolescents. So training children, because several things brought this up. My last visit out there with Jim and the stuff that I see him doing with his kids, and by kids I don't mean his high school kids, like his own son and things like that, is not much older than mine. So mine just turned 8, and then I ended up getting into it with a coach about a month ago over training kids the same age. And basically he was one of those coaches that, how do I say this? His default level is asshole, and that's what he uses to motivate. He's like just motivating through being an asshole. And I just had to explain to him, like, what is the old saying? You catch a lot more bees with honey than you do with vinegar, or whatever the hell it is. And it's like, the way I go about it with kids is much different. Like, my goal for an adolescent kid is not to make them into the best athlete in the world. It's to basically 100% instill habits and joy in exercise. And through that, and that's what I was trying to explain to him. I was like, you're going to get a lot more work out of these kids if they like you. Like, goal number one is just literally make them like what they're doing, and realize, especially in today's day and age, like, you go to parks. We've talked about this before. I drive around this town, and when I was a kid, you'd go to a park, and every single baseball diamond, every basketball court, it was all covered with kids playing. And if there's any time in the world, especially in the Western world here, that we need to just instill in kids that like exercise is fun and can be good. It's probably now. So just get your guys' thoughts on that. I mean, the biggest thing I do with kids is, like I said, is just it's short, fun training. Now, are there times like that my son comes in and he's dragging ass? Yeah. And if he's feeling bad, then we might cut his training in half. But I mean, it's like, okay, buddy, this is your job for the day. We're going to try and make it fun. But you just need to punch the clock and get your part done. And just trying to instill in these kids that it's a good thing, it's a fun thing. And that's the same thing with my whole buy-ups and stuff I do in training. It was a backlash against my induction into sports and lifting and exercise as a kid. Like the coaches I had they would punish us with more work. If you guys have, I'm sure Jarrell's had this stuff like, okay, you guys fucked up, go do laps. And it was like, okay, you're just instilling in me that exercise is punishment and is shit. And the way I went about it with that is like, basically we earned our way to extra work, trying to flip that whole thing on its head. You get more work by doing well, not by doing less. Like I would kick kids, you're not working today, get the fuck out. You don't get to work type of thing. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on kids and training and how we should go about it and time spent and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of it for our stuff with kids. I mean, my youngest right now is 6, but he's a little bit different because he wants to, like, he's like all about coming to the gym and doing stuff and training and all that. But the idea of this is not a team sport for us. So this is like a, voluntary extra participation program. So it's not like when you show up to a team program, that's where you get more of because those people like club coaches, team coaches, they act like you have to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge culture of that before. But for us, it's like, I mean, if a kid really is hating it here, especially in this area, they're not like, their parents aren't going to support it. They're not going to come in. Sometimes they do, because some parents do just show up and they're like, I want you to kick his ass and all this stuff. And it's like, slow down. I'm not like, and I do want them to take ownership of it. Like, and then they start to develop and then they start to kind of push themselves a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Especially if they start as like a teenager or something, because they come in and they got this just Eeyore attitude for like just about everything. And so if you just start to see a few things where you're like, okay, they kind of push themselves on that. And then you can kind of use that to like push them on other things. So they're like, okay, that's authentic effort. So it's like taking ownership of the effort that they put into the gym. So these are like my underlying goals. And I know sometimes parents see me out there coaching and I don't like cue the kid 100 times. Like, no, like I try to pick 1 or 2 things and then let them fail a little bit. Like, and they're all nervous when they get here too. Like they're nervous. They either want to like prove something to their dad or whoever, or like, trying to show off kind of thing. So you have to kind of balance that delicate nature out. But yeah, it's not like I don't know. I haven't yelled at any person really. I more just get annoyed. That's like my like weaponized annoyance is what is like, all right, dude, like that's kind of what it is. But I've never yelled or shouted at a kid through a workout. Mm-hmm. I'll like, encourage. If I get loud, it's usually I'm encouraging you to do, move faster or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm not putting anybody down or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't know. And of course, it's very individual because we have kids and like there's 6 and 7 year olds that come in. Like you said, they have a huge attention span. They want to be there. They want to do this. But I'd say the average kid, I mean, is just get them through, get some good work done, and as long as they can have an attention span. Like 15, 20 minutes, you can get a ton done. And like I said, but the big one for me is just, and I've caught shit about this from my clients when I was running the gym. Like any new person, not just kids. Now, kids I'm super nice to when they come in. But even your average, like, you could tell it was a new person because I'd be really pleasant with them. And it's part of the deal. Yeah. Basically, I had to earn, like, there's a level of trust. And if you get these people to like you and trust you, then they'll do more. Like, and that's what I was trying to explain to this other coach. Like, if your default is asshole, then going asshole doesn't work when you need to. Like, there's times with my kids that I have to get stern and I have to get like, hey, you're slacking off, get to work. But if I just do that all the time, when I say that, it has no effect, because that's all that's just Coach Asshole over there. That's what he does. They're not going to listen to you. But if you get these kids to like you and work hard for, like, they want to work hard for you, big difference. And I think that bleeds into the rest of their life. Like, the last thing we need is a whole army of kids. We're in a day where physical activity is already super limited. So you as a coach, then you become their first real experience with any kind of athletics, and with this 6-year-old or whatever it is. And now their only experience within this field is somebody being a dick. That's not going to lead to. And many times I just see that going bad is in their lifetime and the way they relate to exercise. So, I mean, that's the problem I have with it. But
that depends on what are the overall goals, right? And my buddy Brian Grasso's talked about this for years when he was with the IYCA. Is that, and we've talked about this in the podcast before, most of these people by far and away are not going to play college sports. So if that's true, then what is the primary reason you're doing all of this? It's to instill a lifelong, habit of fitness and all the other ton of benefits that come with it. So if that's the goal, then you need to figure out how to keep people showing up year after year, like trying to like it, so it becomes a lifelong habit. And I know for me, like, we had the old presidential fitness test in school, and so they would the gym teacher would just show up and test us, and I placed literally dead last in almost every event. And you had to do it in front of everyone else in school, which is already humiliating enough. And then to have the gym teacher yell at you that you should be trying harder as you're like dying to do the 1 mile run and you're about ready to pass out. I hated fitness stuff for years. I'm like, this is so stupid. Why would I ever do this? Like, I suck at it. Everybody makes fun of me. And the person who's supposed to help me just yells at me. It's like, I'm not learning anything.
Well, that thing, they did nothing to prepare us for it.
No, that was the thing.
You showed up and they're like, okay, we're doing the test today. What test? Like, we didn't prepare for this at all. Like, we're running a mile? All we've done is play dodgeball.
Yeah, exactly.
Not prepared.
So I've always had that criticism about, and now they used to, it is, transitioning from whatever it was, the physical fitness stuff from the 70s or whatever, into, I forget when the transition kind of started to happen. So they had the presidential fitness test. I think that was a JFK thing. And he had like a whole paper about European kids, kicking our ass and everything. Mm-hmm. And then, so the transition starting to get to where we are now in terms of you really can't do in school or at least public education, you can't push kids a whole lot. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that essentially is backed off of that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not making a political stance here or anything like that. But it's just changed a whole lot. But even that, because, and it's almost one of those things where people took the wrong thing out of it. It's like the coaches and the PE teachers were being assholes. Not that you needed to stop doing the fitness side of PE.
Right.
But the actual practice of doing it needed to change. You could do the same work, same type of workout, right? Where somebody's just calling you a little bitch the whole time versus one where it's like, hey, you're doing this today. This is your or learning to regress things down or scale things to where you're at. Like if you had kids who are out of shape or whatever, it's like, okay, cool. We'll do this today. We're going to work this to develop. And then learning that, understanding that, and then going forward, you could have built kids' confidence and all that stuff. But yeah, it's like you play football one week and dodgeball now you do like the cup stacking, and then they're like, all right, now we're doing the presidential fitness test. You can't do pull-ups. Well, that sucks. I guess you suck at pull-ups. That's it for you. Like, that's kind of how it goes. It's not like, all right, well, here's the strategy to like get better. And here's where we want to see those standards get to. Like, you can train to get there.
Yeah.
Just like you can study to pass a math test, you can like train to like actually pass this test as well.
Yeah, I'd be like using the math example, just coming in and being like in English class and be like, hey, you bastards, here's a math test. Oh, you all suck. Sorry. I hate math.
Yeah. I don't know. That's just a tough one for me, and it's a subject I see all the time, and one that I don't know, I fight with the most. Like that and parents. You know, parents and their kids. Like I've kicked numerous ones out. And it's like, and that's like with me when I take my kids to coaches, like both my kids are athletic and I stay the fuck out of it. It's like, you're not here for me. You listen to them. It's their job. You do what they tell you to. And because I hate the parents that are on the sideline. Oh. And I've had numerous ones. Like we had one kid, he was a little overweight, whatever. And his dad was clinically obese. And he's the father that sits on the sideline yelling that you need to work harder, you fat little fucker. And
Jesus.
I was like, you got to go. You're out of here, you know? And I've just seen it numerous times with other parents. Like the kids, just their relationship wasn't the greatest with one parent or whatever. And like you could see them work different if that parent was there. And it's like, you're going to be better off if you just go. I'm trying to become friends with this kid. And I've just seen it work better that way. Like if I take that first 2 weeks, month, whatever it takes, just teach form and get this kid to like me, they're going to work harder for me. You know, it's once I get that relationship with them, I can now what I say means something. Like I have some level of respect with this kid, and and they're going to do what I ask, and they're going to enjoy it and realize that, hey, this is fun. What we're doing here is fun, and that comes through. A lot of that's built through praise over just getting your ass chewed all the time. Like I remember coaches, and that used to be the default back in our day. But I kind of understand it. I mean, to a bit, because they like, okay, you're on the football team. We get an hour and a half with you. We got to get ready for a game. Well, I'm going to run these little fuckers in the ground, you know. And you know, we're going to use the Russian model. Whichever one of these guys survives, they're the ones playing.
Yep.
You know? Type of thing. But
you see a kid transition from like when a kid comes in and is either shy, or I would put the spectrum as this, like really shy and reserved and scared to like do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then like showing off, like kid who just like wants to show off and like, oh, I already know everything kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you can see a kid transition kind of more to the middle of like just authentic effort for both of them. Like you'll see if you build the relationship, but also don't do it through just shouting them down or whatever. And they'll then have authentic effort, authentic confidence in the gym. And you see it with how they treat other kids coming in. Like the shy kid won't always like interject, but if they see someone struggling or something, they'll be the one to be like they'll say something like kind of low key, like, hey, do it like this or whatever. Yeah. And a kid who's just showing off, whereas before they would just like try to obliterate them by showing them how great they are or whatever, they'll like cheer them on and encourage them. So you also create a better environment through this as well, through the kids, which will get the whole, like raise the whole level up, not just, and you know, Jim Windler's talking about that at his, I think it was a Swiss conference speech or whatever, but it's like, it's not necessarily just about the top kids you have. You got to like bring everyone up. And then that's what creates a great team environment, but also in terms of who comes to the gym, it's like, why would anyone want to go to a gym when they're just like, you know, getting shouted down all the time?
Yeah.
And now a kid might force, like a parent might force them through it, but they're not going to, you know, stick with it.
Well, yeah, and there's a difference. And that's what I was explaining to this coach it's just flat out mean. It's like, there's a difference. Like, you can treat me like that. I'm a 46-year-old man that understands what you're trying to do. You're trying to motivate me through your anger. Okay, whatever. I can understand that and I'll work with that. This kid doesn't understand that. He just thinks you're being a meanie.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to come back. Whereas, once we're at a certain age and we reach a certain level of maturity and things, there's stuff that go on there, and I'm choosing to be there. Some of these kids aren't. A lot of them aren't, especially nowadays. It's like their parents are like, we need you in an activity. We're taking you here. And then they take you there and you meet Mr. Asshole. And now you really don't want to go.
Yeah.
So, and that's...
I've seen it.
Yeah, as I was trying to explain to these people, and it's like your retention rate is gonna. This is a business that they're trying to get up and going and run, and it's like your retention rate's going to be shit, because word's going to spread real fast.
Well, in a way, there's more responsibility. I mean, there's a ton of pedagogy versus andragogy, like learning theory out there. Like kids are more dependent, and what are you really after? Build some success, build some confidence, because that's ultimately, I think, confidence comes through experience. Like, hey, good job, you did good at that, and comparing them to what they couldn't do before versus the superstar kid who's just, it's a good point, Jarrell, about having some of those kids, instead of crushing the more introverted kids or the kids who aren't athletically gifted, to take a leadership role and encourage them. Say, look, I do it like this, and give them almost a little bit of a leadership role or something like that, because, what are we after with these kids? And unfortunately, coaching is, sure, there's all kinds of certifications, but you don't know what you're going to get. Some of the dads in the bleachers or the moms, but even the coaches, you get just some ignorant schmuck. He shouldn't be leading a bunch of kids because he could be affecting them for the rest of their lives.
Yes. And I am definitely not saying as a coach that you don't need to be a hard ass. Like, that is part of it. It's targeted though. Like, in my opinion, there's a time and place for it, and that comes after earned respect.
Rapport, yeah.
You got to have that rapport and respect for that being an asshole to even work, to be effective in the way you want it to. Like, if all you are is belittling, that's just all you are. And they're going to realize that real quick, and they're just going to ignore you. They're going to let it pass. It's just like the kid that's always abused by his parents all the time. They just become numb to it. Whatever, that's just Coach Asshole. Don't need to listen to him. Just let him say his thing, and then we'll move on.
Well, unfortunately, I saw data years ago that stuck in my head that negative kind of approach doesn't work as well as a constructive approach. It just doesn't, even in adults. And yet, what does the media do? They kind of show us these Jillian Michael type personal trainers. Yeah. What's the matter with you? Weak, pathetic. And the public thinks that's what personal trainers are. They think that's what exercise scientists or coaches, they think that's what we do.
Yeah.
And it's just not right. That's not correct. Doesn't work, and smart people know better. I get it. It's a good point, Phil. I mean, adult learners, they're more independently motivated. They can rely on their own experiences. You could push them a little bit more, like, come on, and some people could respond to that if they have good self-esteem or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's even adults that's not a good idea, you know? I don't know. I hate that that's the stereotype of anything related to exercise. Yeah. That it's this sort of drill instructor negativity, and especially with kids, that's a bad idea, because you're going to affect them for life.
Belittling you into betterment, it doesn't work well.
It just depends on what expectations that we create, and they don't even have to be vocalized necessarily, but just, I don't know, the kids coming in and squatting every day, and then is able to do it correctly, consistently, and they come in one day and they're doing it poorly, and you're like, what is this? Like, having that, like, you didn't meet your expectation that we've already set. Like, these are the kind of places where that works, because they know that their expectation is higher than whatever they just put out there.
Yeah.
But if you just yell at them with there's like no expectation, they'll just always feel like trash.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's just like the presidential fitness test. I mean, what you have to do is realize that these new kids, they're coming to you. They don't know this shit. Like, them doing poorly on a test, like, okay, we're going to do this, see how you do. Like, if they do poorly, it speaks to you as a coach. Like if you've been coaching them and they do poorly on your test, like you're not teaching them well.
Yeah.
And it's just like the presidential. Yeah, there's lots of kids that failed that thing. You know why? Because we didn't practice at all. We had no warm up for that. And, it's just learning that. And that's one thing I try to do with kids is like, there's always going to be something to correct. But with a new beginner kid, especially like you talked about, you get the shy kids and think like most of them are nervous to be at any coach for the first time. And then you just start talking shit on them. My deal is I always like to, let's say we're learning how to squat. Oh, you did this great. Always lead with something. You're doing this good now, but now we need to fix this. Give them a bite of something positive before you throw more negative at them. Like, this is going great now. Now let's try to make this better. We just need to put this here. And just build that relationship, and that exercise is good, and show them, celebrate all these any little gain they got, like celebrate. Hey, you used to do this, now we do this. You used to pick up 10 pounds, now we pick up 15. Good job. Not, hey, you're still weak as shit. Now I'll do that with my training partner. Like we'll go on there today and I'll squat 700, he'll squat 550, and I'll tell him how much pussy he is. But he's 45 years old. And he expects that. Plus, he's also been with me for like 4 years, and he went through the nice stages of me. So I can do that. But
well, like you said, I don't know. He expects it on some level. Like instead of being blindsided, like he doesn't know you, and then you're just a dick.
Yeah. And I guess
And what happens when that person is 7 years old? You know what I mean? So damaging. I love the idea of finding something you can do. I once had a manager say something along the lines of, you get friends by saying yes. So in this case, like praise. And then you get respect by saying no. And then to your point, but now you've earned the right to go work on these other things. These other things aren't good. You're not just praising falsely. You're saying you built this stuff up. Now you've reached a level that we need to work on this stuff. It's not so good, but you've already shown me you can be the master of your situation, Well,
you've talked about this before, Phil, like finding things that people are intrinsically better at. And it doesn't mean you don't need to train other aspects, but especially kids and younger adults even, just moving them towards that direction. I remember my buddy Adam Glass was teaching a class once, and he was talking to this person. I don't remember what exercise they were doing, and he's like, doesn't it just feel better to do something you're better at? If you're built like a power lifter and you want to run marathons, cool. If that's what you really want to do. But if you're doing it because someone told you you're just supposed to, maybe you should change and do the thing you're probably going to do better at.
Yeah, see, and that type of thing, that's a whole different topic. That type of thing, you run into that all the time. And I just
you find people just pushing kids in one direction only, and they may or may not be best at it.
Yeah, the easiest way to beat that is like I've had numerous people come in, like they're built to be Olympic weightlifters and they want to be a runner.
Yeah.
And I beat them through just being sneaky. Okay, you want to be a runner? Well, these Olympic lifts are going to help your running.
Yeah.
And we're going to give you a little bit of that. And they quickly realize that like people like what they're good at.
Yeah.
It's a natural thing. If you're naturally good at something, you're going to gravitate towards that. So if you take somebody that even though they think they want to be this, but as a coach, like you're just genetically predisposed for this other sport, if you just feed them to that a little bit, most likely they're going to like it because they're naturally going to be good at it. And I don't know, the greater message here, I think, on this whole thing is like our number one job at this day and age with kids shouldn't be like making them the next Michael Jordan at age 8. Let's just instill good habits and a joy of exercise. Like that's it. That's goal number one. Let's set down, let's build some habits in these kids in our new environment, in an age where like we're all sloths, like we're reaching quickly. What is that? What is that movie, the cartoon they put out where everybody just ate the goo and they were on devices all the time and they couldn't hardly walk? That's where we're heading.
Wally?
Oh yeah,
Wally. Yes, yeah. Wally. Yeah, we're quickly headed there.
Yeah, their bones. They had no bones. They didn't need them anymore, kind of thing, or something.
Like we're heading in that direction. So literally, what us as strength coaches or people in this field, like number one goal should be, like it's easy. Just look around. Like I said, go to parks and stuff. See how many kids are actually playing. It's limited. The more we can do to get people just being active is a good thing. And the same thing's going to happen. 0.01% of them are going to be amazing athletes, like always. But holy shit, at least we can set up some habits for life and health later. And just the joy of exercise. Like most kids nowadays, it's weird. Like, let's go play some pickup basketball. Nah, I want to sit inside. Like, fuck, we need to get them moving. And the best way to do that is to teach them that this shit is fun. Like 99% of my childhood fun that I remember was us doing dumb active things. Like that's how we had fun. And that we're not seeing it now.
Yeah. Phil, you once said, I think you're talking about body fatness, but it's also true with athleticism. We have this widened gap. We have like elite and then physically incompetent, if you will.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's this huge gap. Whereas I think our generation grew up playing Nerf football or wiffle ball or what, I don't know, whatever it was, just wrestling around like fools, playing tag. And 20, 30 years later, the kids didn't go through that so much, so they lack gross motor skills.
Yes.
And so you've either got these people that are super elite, but it's not like a bell curve where most of the population is in the middle. At least it feels that way.
Yes.
I'm sure there are still norms where there's still average people in the middle, but it just feels like, because of video games, there's not much enticement to go exert yourself against resistance. That's fun. Like, it's satisfying, and that's what needs to be taught instead of, like you said, like we're going to run laps. Even at the college level, you guys suck. You're obviously out of shape. Go run laps, and it just punishes them. When honestly, most of them are overtrained anyway. That's a whole nother topic. You're just not taking this positive reinforcement kind of approach.
Yep, and especially at that early age, like if we somehow fix the early age thing, like if everybody all of a sudden today there was a switch that flipped, and like everybody that's 16 years old had already had, I don't know, let's say they all started at 7. They've already had 9 years of positive reinforcement with exercise. Guess what you can do now?
Right. Yep.
You can be an asshole at the high
school
level. You can challenge them now because they've already have this 7-year base built of enjoying exercise. They can all pass the presidential fitness test because we've practiced it and helped them become better in a positive way. Guess what we can do now? We can push them hard because they already love it. They already have a love for being physically active. And like you can't drive that hard until there's enjoyment there because they're just going to leave. Like that bad part of it is going to overtake the good parts of it, and they're just not going to come back. So, and then possibly, like we said, for life, like they may never fucking exercise again.
Right. No, that almost happened to me with baseball. I suck at like tracking and that kind of stuff, but I was good at like body kinesthetic stuff, like martial arts or skateboarding. But the point being is, I almost had to beg not to play any more baseball. I wasn't good at it, and it was hurtful. It was damaging. Even now, I have like PTSD about it. But to your point, I just needed the option to do something that I was actually more geared toward. I don't know, just built for. Or bodybuilding or any of that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's more of a solo versus team environment or whatever it might be. But you're right. It takes maturity and experience from a coach to be able to do that responsibly, because they have a huge amount of responsibility here. This kid's whole future. And what are you really after? As human beings, we tend to be tribal and we versus they and competitive, and that can be good. But keeping that positive like, hey, nice job, I got you that time, maybe you'll get me next time, or whatever. That's a higher level attitude. And I don't know, a lot of these untrained or inexperienced, like, dad coaches, they need reminded of that, right? Like, what are we really after here with this kid? Develop his body in a certain way. It's not going to be big muscles or whatever. It could be better coordination, but it's mostly fun. Like, it's supposed to be fun.
Well, yeah. Look at all the people. We've been doing this, for like 16 years? All the people we've interviewed. And most of them, every time we ask how you got into this, how did you get into this? Like, a large percent of the time, it's like, well, so-and-so, I walked into this place and so-and-so was there and took me under their wing and taught me things. You never hear like, well, I walked into Joe's gym and he fucking belittled me to the point I just wanted to be better.
No. That's right. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work that way. They all have this positive story of somebody they ran into, or I was kind of an outcast. I sucked at this. I sucked at that. I walked into this place and somebody was there. And that somebody positively affected them, and took them under their wing and taught them some things. It's never the opposite,
Phil, on a related note, I know we're about out of time, but this podcast has gone on for so long. I remember back in 2009, there were people who listened with their kids that were like 12. Yeah. Well, now those kids are like in their mid-20s. They actually grew up and, So, maybe if you don't have the local coach, maybe there is the right resonating podcast or something out there. I know it's a real minefield, but I don't know. It makes me feel good that we did a little bit of that kind of stuff. Yeah, listen with my kid. And I thought about that the other day. I'm like, my God, these kids are like 27 years old now.
Oh, yeah. Like, we probably have listeners that had kids that now have grandbabies. So, yeah, it's weird, but... All right, well, I don't know, get off my soapbox for today. That was the topic I wanted to touch on, so.
Right on.
All right, guys, well, I'm going to go squat.
All right.
Deadlift, so we will talk to you all later.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community.
The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.